Yo, Adrian, are you ready to learn about the history of the Philly cheesesteak? Well, let me tell you something, my friend. The Philly cheesesteak is a true icon of the city of brotherly love, and it's got a story that's as meaty as the sandwich itself. Philly, the city of brotherly love, where the cheese is whiz and the Liberty Bell is cracked. This is the place where Rocky Balboa and the Eagles reign supreme, and the birthplace of America. But don't let the historical significance fool you. Philly is also home to some of the quirkiest characters you'll ever meet. From the rowdy Eagles fans to the colorful characters in South Philly's Italian market, there's never a dull moment in this town. And don't even get me started on the Philly accent. It's like everyone's talking with their mouth full of hoagies and cheesesteaks. Philly's got some of the most iconic landmarks in the world, like the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, and the Rocky Steps. And if you're feeling fancy, you can always check out the art museum and pretend to be Rocky himself. And let's not forget about the sports. Philly is home to some of the most passionate sports fans in the world. From the Eagles to the Sixers, the Phillies to the Flyers, we bleed green, red, blue, and orange. But don't be fooled by our tough exterior. Philly is also a city of brotherly love and compassion. We may be gruff on the outside, but we've got heart on the inside. Just ask anyone who's ever visited our city, and they'll tell you that Philly is the kind of place that welcomes you with open arms, as long as you're not wearing a Cowboys jersey. Over the years, the Philly cheesesteak has become a cultural icon. It's been featured on countless food shows and travel shows, and it's even been name-dropped in songs by famous Philly natives like Will Smith and Meek Mill. But perhaps the ultimate honor came in 2003 when the Philly cheesesteak was named the official sandwich of Philadelphia. Now, some folks say that the Philly cheesesteak was invented by a hot dog vendor named Pat Oliveri back in the early 20th century. Pat Oliveri was a Philadelphia-born businessman and restaurateur who is widely credited with inventing the Philly cheesesteak sandwich. Born on March 31st, 1918, Oliveri grew up in the Italian market area of South Philadelphia and started working in his family's food cart business as a young man. In 1930, at the age of 12, Oliveri began selling hot dogs from a cart, and eventually he started experimenting with other foods, including steak. Legend has it that one day in the 1930s, Oliveri cooked up some thinly sliced beef on his grill, added some grilled onions and melted cheese, and served it on a hoagie roll. The sandwich was an instant hit with his customers, and the Philly cheesesteak was born. Oliveri went on to open his own restaurant, Pat's King of Steaks, in South Philly in 1966. The restaurant is still open today and is widely considered to be one of the best places to get an authentic Philly cheesesteak. Oliveri continued to work at Pat's until his death in 1974 at the age of 56. Although Oliveri is often credited with inventing the Philly cheesesteak, there is some debate over the sandwich's true origin. Some claim that the sandwich was actually invented by a rival restaurant, Geno's Steaks, which opened across the street from Pat's in the 1960s. However, most Philadelphians consider Pat Oliveri to be the true inventor of the iconic sandwich. The Philly cheesesteak wasn't always the big, juicy sandwich we know and love today. Back in the day, it was a pretty basic affair, but over time, it evolved into the meaty masterpiece we all crave. In the 1930s, a guy named Cocky Joe Lorenza opened up the first official cheesesteak joint in Philly called Joe's Steak Shop. And let me tell you, Joe was a character. He was cocky as hell, and he wasn't afraid to give his customers a piece of his mind. If you asked for ketchup on your cheesesteak, he'd probably tell you to go take a hike. If you asked for mayo, he'd probably tell you to go jump in the river. But despite Joe's rough exterior, people couldn't get enough of his cheesesteaks. The sandwich became a beloved staple of Philly's food scene, and soon, other shops started popping up all over the city. Now, there are other great cheesesteak joints in Philly too, like Jim's Steaks on South Street, which has been around since the 1930s, and Tony Luke's, which is famous for its cheesesteak topped with broccoli rabe and provolone cheese. They all make a mean cheesesteak. No matter where you get your cheesesteak in Philly, one thing is for sure, it's going to be big, it's going to be messy, and it's going to be delicious. Now, what makes a great Philly cheesesteak, you ask? Well, there are a few key components, my friend. First, you need a soft, chewy hoagie roll that can stand up to the weight of all that meat and cheese. Then, you need thinly sliced beef, preferably ribeye, that's been cooked on a griddle until it's tender and juicy. Next, you need some onions, grilled of course, and a generous helping of melted cheese. When you bite into a Philly cheesesteak, you're not just tasting food. You're tasting the history of Philly itself. You're tasting the sweat and blood of the city's blue-collar workers, the passion of its sports fans, and the spirit of its people. The Philly cheesesteak is more than just a sandwich. It's a work of art, a masterpiece of meat and cheese that's been perfected over generations. So go ahead and indulge, my friends. Just be prepared to fall in love with Philly all over again.